The nightmare is a grim that preys upon the insecurities of its victims, trapping them in a world created from their worst fears, and, in the process, draining that individual's aura. But to do so, the nightmare takes the form of that person's most prominent insecurity. For Jean, in the brief instance that we saw his dream world, the nightmare took the form of his equipment, representing his major fear of not being able to live up to the family legacy, that he doesn't belong at Beacon Academy, that he will not become a warrior. For Jean, it was very easy to see, but in Weiss's dream, her insecurities are everywhere. The nightmare has created a much more expansive world, and Weiss's insecurities are plastered all over it. So it might be a little bit difficult to discern which insecurity is the most prominent in Weiss's mind. Our first thought might be that Jacques is the source of Weiss's major insecurities, because he is ever present across this city, in posters, in statues, and the looming hologram that is present in her own inner sanctum. But Jacques actually, although he is a source of a lot of insecurities for Weiss and the way that he's raised her, he is not the main source of Weiss's insecurities. Instead, it is actually Winter, and Winter is the form that the nightmare takes within her dream. Winter in the dream is represented as a book, the rule book that Weiss follows. Weiss will look into this book and ask for a declaration, and then will follow it to the letter. When Weiss found Ruby in episode 4, Weiss didn't immediately start attacking her. She first asked Winter for her judgment, and upon giving that judgment to imprison the traitor for all eternity, Weiss took that essentially as a decree of law, that Winter is the judge and the jury, and so now it's Weiss's job to be the executioner, and she did not question it. It seems like her individuality is almost being stripped away by the nightmare. And this becomes very apparent when, in the previous scene, when Weiss is in the dining room of what looks like the Schnee Manor, and she looks into the book. She starts saying that she will prove that she's the only one that can inherit the name of the Schnee family, that she is the rightful heir to Big Nicholas. But while she's looking into that book, we see a reflection of Weiss, and the vines of the nightmare appear behind that reflection. The nightmare is present inside this book. And from what we can see, it is slowly corrupting Weiss's own self-image. By taking the representation of Winter, someone that Weiss greatly looks up to, she admires and wants to be like, wants to impress, the most important person in her life at this point in time, by having the nightmare take this form and essentially give Weiss orders, it is using her own insecurities against her, and corrupting her, and likely there is a portion of Weiss that is trapped within her own mind that is just watching all of this happen. She is probably losing herself to the nightmare, and that's why it's going to be very important for RWBY to be able to connect with Weiss and try to snap her out of it, break the nightmare's hold. And I think that this is going to lead to the overall conflict in Ice Queendom, where we will see the representation of Winter take the form of more than just a book, and it might be a shadow of Winter Schnee that will be the final enemy that will be faced within Weiss's nightmare. Maybe not the final enemy of Ice Queendom as a whole, as that I have a feeling is likely going to be when the nightmare escapes from Weiss, and they're going to have to fight it in the real world, but since it's drained so much of Weiss's aura, it's grown so large, and it's going to be the entirety of Team RWBY that's going to have to fight against it, or some climactic battle like that. Or there could be a number of other twists and turns along the way. I do think that within Weiss's dream, it is going to be this connection between Weiss and Winter, the insecurities that Weiss feels not being able to live up to either her sister's expectations or the image of herself that she wants to achieve, to be like Winter. And I think that's going to be the core of what RWBY, Blake, and Yang have to break Weiss out of. Of course, there's going to be other insecurities that are going to need to be dealt with along the way, like Weiss's view of the Faunus, and quite possibly of Team Juniper, as well as the control that her father seems to have over her. There's a lot of things that are going to be addressed, but I think at the core of it, it is going to be Weiss's fixation on Winter, this book that she always carries around with her, that she does not want to be parted from. This is the one thing in her nightmare that she will not let go of, is Winter. Jacques, sure, he's everywhere, but it's this book that Weiss clings to. And in one of the conflicts in the future, if Team RWBY is able to break Weiss away from this book, which may not spell good things for robotic dog Klein, because he's the one who's normally carrying the book around, so they might have to either kidnap the doggo or get rid of him in some other way to separate the book from Weiss, or likely just steal the book, get that away, and at that point, RWBY might be able to confront Weiss personally and snap her out of it. To be able to recognize that she isn't being herself, even though it is a technical version of herself and does represent a portion of Weiss, that is not who she wants to be on the outside. She wants to break away from all of this, and hopefully Team RWBY will be able to help her overcome these insecurities. But winter is the key to everything. In this dream world, winter is the nightmare. The Grimm has taken the form of the largest insecurity that Weiss has, and is manipulating her through that. In contrast to Jean's nightmare, where Jean was susceptible to just the bullying of the nightmare itself, Weiss is probably a little bit stronger than that. Having probably experienced bullying throughout her life, the nightmare instead is taking the more manipulative approach. And considering it in that way, the nightmare is actually a pretty intelligent Grimm, being able to filter through a person's memories and insecurities and find the one that is most damaging, or rather most prominent, to be able to manipulate their target, which then also brings into question the possible canonity of the nightmare itself, because this is very highly intelligent for a Grimm, especially in early RWBY, but you know, that's another topic entirely. But for now, the nightmare will of course be defeated by the end of Ice Queendom, and for Weiss to be able to progress from where she is currently to the mentality that she had at the beginning of Volume 2, there are a number of things that she's going to have to overcome in this dream, and this fixation on how she needs to be, that she needs to follow what Winter has done, is going to need to be broken. Not maybe entirely, as we do see in Volume 3 when Winter is introduced for the very first time into the original RWBY series, that Weiss still has a fixation on Winter, wants to impress her, and still kind of wants to be like her, but it's not to the same degree that we are seeing in Ice Queendom. Things are going to have to change, and actually in Volume 3, it was Winter that finally convinced Weiss to not rely on Jacques' money, that she should try to break away and start her own path. But I think the beginnings of that we are going to see here with her connection to RWBY, Yang, and Blake. And it will be that connection to Winter within the dream, that reliance on Winter to make decisions for her, will need to be broken. Weiss will need to start making her own decisions, break away from the rulebook that she's currently following, and of course, the only way that's going to be done is by the interference of RWBY and the rest of her team. So overall, pay attention to the book that Weiss is carrying with her, the representation of Winter within Weiss's dream, because that is what the nightmare is using to manipulate Weiss. That isn't to say that the nightmare isn't present in really everything within the dream, but mainly I think the focus of the nightmare is on this book, that it is taking the form of Winter and using it to manipulate Weiss. Just that one scene that we saw with Weiss's reflection in the book and the nightmare's thorns behind her really proves that to me. But let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. How do you think the nightmare is manipulating Weiss? Do you think it is mainly taking the form of Winter, that this book that Weiss seems to be following to the letter is actually the nightmare itself, not just Weiss's representation of Winter within her dream? It's a combination of both. Or do you think that the nightmare is mainly taking the form of something else? Or do you think it works in a different way, that the entire dream itself is something of the nightmare's creation, that everything is being used to manipulate Weiss? I think largely the world is created from Weiss's subconscious, and the nightmare isn't in control of everything that happens. I think it is mainly controlling a few aspects of it. In Weiss's dream, it is Winter. And in Jean's dream, it was the armor that was tormenting him, preying upon his own insecurities. But with Weiss, I think it is specifically Winter. Again, there might be other things, but for now, Winter is the main key to breaking the nightmare's control over Weiss. But, you know, let me know what you think down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, want to see more like it, more theory videos, Ice Queendom coverage, and RWBY coverage in general, make sure to subscribe and join the Guild of the Eternal Flame. Tweet me at PhoenixKnight7, and I'll see you guys in the next video.